Well, good evening, everyone. Glad you're joining us for our third iteration of MMI Prep Ethics 101, examining some cases where we can understand better about how to deal with ethical scenarios presented in an MMI setting or also in a regular interview setting. These will be continuation of what we've done over the last two weeks. Last week we had a lot of fun with two little mini scenarios, and I think it was real beneficial to get everyone's input on that. Tonight we're going to look at a deeper scenario, a deeper ethical scenario that could possibly be presented in a interview setting, and kind of examine it and see what it looks like and see what the options are. So it's really nice to have everyone here in the room. We'll wait for a couple of minutes, let others join us before we get started. But I'd be interested if you could type into the comments a hello to me, and I'd like to see that you're awake and that you're paying attention, and maybe who you are, or where you're calling from, or where you're watching from. Actually, that'd be nice to hear. I'm in beautiful Austin, Texas. It's a sunny day, about 72 degrees outside. It's probably one of those perfect days. I went out and walked the dog for a while, and that was nice, and it was good to get outside, and hope you're having good weather where you are too. That'd be great. So we'll hang on for a second. So we have Kareem from San Antonio, just about an hour down the road, down I-35 from where I am, and nice to see you guys. Southern California, sunny in Las Vegas, Jennifer says, awesome. Colorado, Billy's in Colorado. Hopefully you're uncovering from the feet of snow that you have gotten recently. We have some from Miami. We have New York City. That's great. Here's Paige from Lake Worth, Florida. Hello, Paige. And we have California, another New Yorker, and gray and wet in New York City, says John. So, sorry about that. I do love New York City so much. Been there many times. Wonderful thing is I do love to travel, particularly in the U.S., to see all the wonderful places we have here. There's Phoenix and Houston and North Carolina and Illinois, and I guess that would be Massachusetts. Vladislav is in MA, Massachusetts. Glad you're joining us tonight. So it's wonderful to have all you in the room, watching on either Facebook or on YouTube in the MAP TV. So we'll get started here in a sec. Some of you here's somebody from Minnesota. Vladislav is in Boston. I love Beantown. It's a great place. I'm a real history buff, and so Boston is super cool in terms of the history of the United States and all that. So it's really exciting to see you guys in the room. So we're going to continue with this that we've been talking about. You don't have to have been in any of the previous sessions to really understand. I'll kind of catch you up with a brief overview of what we're talking about and how we're talking about these things, but really do want to talk a little bit about MMI. Those of you that have been in the room will know, and those of you that have not, that the MMI is the multiple mini interview. Really a series of kind of short scenarios, independent stations, independent of each other, where you're asked to respond to whatever question there might be. There may be a scenario of some sort that you have to act out. There are non-acting scenarios as well as just sort of character questions that come up. And what the MMI is really meant to do for the medical school is to assess some personal qualities or skills that you might have or that they are looking for in their applicants. Obviously, the ability to communicate, your critical thinking skills, maybe your self-awareness, the aptitude to deal with a situation that you're presented with is also what they're looking for, and what they want to see more than you answering the question with the right answer is what is the thought process that you're going through in order to talk about whatever they've presented to you as the dilemma or the problem. There are many issues that come up in these MMI scenarios. Sometimes there's medical issues, nothing that you can study for necessarily. You don't have to know anything about medicine as it were, but there may be legal issues involved that you need to point out or consider, cultural issues. There could be institutional issues such as institutional policies, such as a hospital policy that might need to be considered in a particular scenario. Social issues frequently are involved. We're actually going to talk a little bit about that tonight, in addition to some other things, and financial issues sometimes are at stake in these scenarios. So there are many issues that could be involved as we go along in these types of MMI sessions, or also in the traditional type of interview. They could as well be presented in those. So as I've talked about before, I've offered you this framework to understand how to sort of go about dealing with an ethical issue that may be presented to you. So the first step is to identify what actually is the issue. What's the dilemma here that's being presented to you? It may not say to you, here's the dilemma, deal with it, or what would you do? So you have to sort of tease out when you're looking at it, what is the dilemma involved in this particular issue? Understand what are the facts here and what are the things that we don't probably know. You also need to then delineate what are my options here. And this is something that you could actually do for the interviewer. If you're acting it out, but if you're not acting it out, if they just say, what would you do in this situation? You could say, well, there are a variety of different options available to us. There is A, B, C, D, etc. And all of them have different aspects available to you. And I would choose to do this. I would choose option B or C or whatever. And then you implement what you consider to be the optimal option. And that is, in fact, answering the question. You have to answer the question. Often in an interview setting, students will talk all around the issue, and not actually answer the question. So always get to the point. Definitely important. So that's the framework. So what we're going to do now is look at an ethical scenario, a situation, and sort of understand, what it looks like. So I'll read this to us, and then we'll look at what all this is about. So our scenario for tonight is we have a middle-aged woman named Sarah Smith who presents to your clinic for a follow-up after an ER visit. She tells you that she was instructed to follow up at the clinic after being treated for a broken arm about a week ago. She and her mother, Edna Reed, are both patients in your clinic. As you flip through her chart, you are reminded that Sarah has had frequent, vague abdominal pains, but thus far your investigation of the pain has been fruitless. So we have a middle-aged woman, Sarah Smith, coming in after having been seen in the ER with a broken arm. Sarah's right arm, as she presents to you, is in a sling and a cast. She's wearing dark glasses, and out of the corner of your eye, you see, out of the corner of her eye, you see that the dark glasses are obstructing a black eye. She says to you, "I tripped over a basketball that my son left on the floor and broke my arm. My eye hit the corner of the table as I was going down." She further says, "You remember my mother, Edna Reed? She is also your patient. Last fall, she fell and broke her hip and a few ribs. So I'm concerned that we both need to be checked for osteoporosis." So we're presented here with what her explanation is for this event. However, reluctantly, Sarah begins to relay the following information. "Will you promise to keep this just between you and me? Edna's injury last fall was the result of John's anger," John being her husband. "He pushed her down the stairs, and after he and I got into a fight. She tried to intervene. It was my fault. If I hadn't been so stupid and started the fight, none of this would have happened. I made him mad again the other night, and this arm and my eye are the result of my stupidity." So we get further information here from Sarah as she relates things to you in this office visit in your clinic. Sarah reports that John was abused as a child and therefore swore never to abuse or even spank their 3 children. "I just can't seem to be good," Sarah says. "Please, please do not report my husband to the authorities. If you do, he will kill me and Mom." So here's the dilemma. Do you report Sarah's and Edna's injuries to the appropriate authorities? What do you say to Sarah? What are the various issues involved in this case? So I'd like to hear some of you talk about, chat with me, comment, if you would, on what you think about this dilemma. What are you going to do here? And what are the issues that you see in this case? Trish says, "Not a part of my response, but John sounds like absolute garbage." As an aside, I guess, Trish, yes. So what do you think about this? Give me some input here. What are you thinking about this? VJ says, "This sounds like a cry for help. People do not tell you about these things if they don't actually want help. I would take the opportunity to bring her and her mother in with the kids to get checked for osteoporosis," I guess in quotes. And then VJ continues, "And then call the authorities while they're in the office." Trish says, "Yes, a physician is obligated by law to report the abuse." So whose abuse are you reporting? Trish, maybe you can clarify that. What you think. Jennifer says, "Help her get a restraining order. I believe you have a legal obligation to report him, but I would offer safe haven resources to her and her mom." John says, "I would have to tell the authorities, but if you don't tell the authorities, then they die due to your inaction." I think this is Paige points out, I think children and elder abuse are mandatory reports. You have to report the abuse, says Rita, even though the daughter said it. Also provide resources to a women's shelter. Yeah. Paige further says, help her find an exit strategy for the next time he becomes violent. numbers of shelters or hotlines. Good. Yeah. What do you think about this? What do you say to Sarah? Sarah's standing in front of you. She's pleading for you not to report John to the authorities. What do you say to Sarah? What do you say to Sarah in that case? Reporting him to the authorities after offering them a safe place where they can get help. Yeah, VJ says first you validate her feelings and you remain calm. You know, there's good. Compassion would be the first step, says Rita. Absolutely. A strong sense of compassion is really important. I would say to Sarah, I understand you're afraid, says Rita. Yeah, and you know, I think what we're talking about here, you know, there are things called therapeutic messages, and I think in this case, one of those therapeutic messages is because Sarah has gone on to say, and we'll go back to look at that. Sarah says, I just can't seem to be good. She also says, if I hadn't been so stupid and started the fight, none of this would have happened. All of this is a result of my stupidity. So what's called a therapeutic message would be Sarah, this is not a result of your stupidity. It is not a result of you not being good. This is not your fault. This is not your fault. This is not your fault. So this is a therapeutic message to Sarah that you reassure her that this is not her fault, because she sees it and is verbalizing to you that this is her fault. Jennifer says, I would tell her that abusers will continue to abuse and reassure her that she has done nothing wrong. Absolutely. There's a therapeutic message there. She is a victim and we help her get some help. She's clearly physically and mentally abused. So what are the issues here? Let's kind of delve into that, and we can talk a little bit about some of each of these. But here's just a few of the issues that we can look at in terms of this case. Confidentiality here is an issue. Sarah, you have a responsibility as a physician to hold information about your patient confidential. Sarah has asked you to keep this confidential. Confidentiality is an obligation of the medical profession of a physician. Often trust is built into this issue of confidentiality. Autonomy is closely related here to confidentiality. Sarah has autonomy. She is an adult. She is over 18. She is an adult here who is apparently competent to make her decision, and competence is another issue here. What I didn't put in the narrative for this case is that Edna, Sarah's mother, suffers from some level of dementia. So we're dealing here with some issues of competence. Competence being Sarah being a competent adult to make her own decisions, but clearly Edna may well not be competent to make her own decisions. Beneficence is an issue here. What is the thing that is going to benefit most your patient, Sarah? In this case, Edna is also your patient. She's not in the clinic today, but she is a patient of your clinic. What is of the greatest benefit in this case? Non-maleficence is do no harm. Do not harm the situation any more than you have to. Sarah says to you, if you report John, he will kill me and Edna. The rage, I guess, will engulf him, and he will, potentially, according to Sarah, act in a way that could be deadly. Paternalism is an issue here. How paternalistic are you as a physician going to act? Is it your role to be paternal in this case for Sarah and or for Edna or the children involved? We don't know, for example, based on the information we're given, how old the children are. I think that would be an example of what is not known, what we do not know here. What is ultimately the physician's responsibility here to your patient medically? What is the responsibility that you have? And finally, there are clearly legal issues here, legal obligations that have to be recognized and addressed. So there's a lot of issues here that we need to talk about. We need to sort of examine. And so what I want to offer you, now you remember the framework that we talked about earlier, dealt with what are the options potentially available to you. So in this case, what I want to offer to you are 5 options, and I want to go through each of the options, and then we're going to talk about each one in terms of the pluses and minuses of that particular option that may be. And what we'll do is place these options on a continuum. What I like to do typically is identify what are the extremes and then move toward the middle, and hopefully as we get toward the middle we come up with potentially the best option. Often the extremes are options but not good options, and so we'll look at these on sort of a continuum. So let's look at these options that are available to us. So option A, the social circumstances of this case are complicated. So we're talking about social issues here. The social dynamic in this family. The social circumstances of this case are complicated. Sarah is in your clinic because of a broken arm. Attend in option A, attend to the arm only. Allow the social circumstances to work themselves out as often they do without any intervention by medical personnel. So she's there for you to deal with her broken arm. You deal with the broken arm and you move on. She's asked you not to turn John in. So you deal with the broken arm, which is your physician's responsibility, is to deal with the medical issue at hand. Option B, you report Edna, the mother, to Adult Protective Services, and you convince Sarah to go to a shelter. If she refuses, you offer to drive her to one yourself. You give her your phone number, and you tell her that you're available anytime, day or night. So if she needs to call you, she can. So it's option B. You're going to turn in Edna, and you're going to try to convince Sarah that there are options available to her, and that you'll even take her there if that's going to be helpful. Option C, tell Sarah that you're required by law to report Edna. Edna being elderly. Most states in the United States, certainly here in Texas as an example, have laws about elder abuse. And typically, as in Texas, if you're over 65 or incapacitated mentally, which apparently Edna is over 65 and may well be mentally incapacitated because of the dementia, that you plan to report Edna to the authorities. You refer Sarah to some shelters and tell her that if her husband becomes violent again, to go to the shelter. You encourage her to request that John attend a treatment program for his anger, and you encourage Sarah to seek counseling. Option D, you do not report Edna because of the danger in which this will place her. This will also protect Sarah. Encourage Sarah to seek counseling for herself and Edna, and to request that John enter a treatment program. Option D. So you don't report her. You don't report Edna because of the danger here. Is this the best, in terms of beneficence, is this perhaps a good benefit? Are you concerned that in terms of non-maleficence or doing no harm, that reporting may do harm if John becomes so angered that he hurts them even more, or potentially in a deadly way? Or option E, you ask Sarah to convince her husband to come into the clinic for family counseling, and you threaten to turn him in if he does not agree to do so. So these are some options that, there probably are others that are available to us, to you as a physician, but you're going to look at these as an array of options available to you. So you're trying to identify what are all the things that I possibly could do, and then I try to figure out which is the optimal one, which is the one that's most reasonable for us. So let's go back and look at some of these options and talk about them. Option A. Option A is the things are going to work out however they would. This is, in my view, and I think probably to many, not a reasonable option, or probably the least reasonable of the options. If we recognize that the acute problem here is the broken arm, so you address the broken arm, of course, but the physician, we got to recognize, has two other obligations that really must be met. The first being that the reason for the broken arm is the environment of abuse that Sarah and Edna are in, and Sarah particularly as your patient. If you ignore this, there's probably going to be more visits to your clinic or to the emergency department for other injuries that come up. Next time they may be more serious or even deadly. Edna may be also at risk for more serious injury because of her age. So firstly, you gotta recognize that there's a reason for the broken arm. Secondly, you gotta recognize that the law requires you to report cases of domestic abuse, particularly involving those who are incompetent. And so this gets at the issue of competence. It could be argued that Edna is incompetent to make her own decisions. The law requires you to do this. So the physician is required to, assure that competent victims of domestic violence know the resources that are available to them. And you must do that. So just treating the arm and sort of letting things go, probably not a good option. Option A is probably one that we would mark off the list as not a good option. So let's talk about option B. So option B here is to report Edna and convince Sarah. So you're going to convince Sarah to go, and you're even going to say to Sarah, "I'll take you. Here's my number. Call me if something happens." Now, arguably, this is paternalism at its greatest. You are taking on the role of a parent, which is sort of the meaning of this word paternalism. You're taking on a parental role here. You have to recognize that Sarah is a legally competent person and should only be given the option to go to a shelter. You cannot force her to go to a shelter. She's an adult who can make her own decisions. She knows the situation with her husband better than you do. And but you should assure her that there are options available to her, and that and potentially that the law and that the law requires you to report Edna's injury to the authorities. So option B, probably not a great option. It doesn't recognize the necessity of showing Sarah that she's an adult and that she legally can make her own decisions, and you don't want to put yourself in a position to be making decisions for Sarah necessarily. Edna, on the other hand, a different story. And potentially, if we knew the ages of the children, then we could. Now, for example, if the children are older and out of the house, it doesn't matter clearly. If there are minor children still in the house, then that is a concern. Sarah, however, relates to you that he has never injured the children, so that may well be less of an issue. Option C. Let's look at option C. Option C is potentially, I think in my mind, maybe the most reasonable of the options available to us. You tell Sarah that you've got to report Edna, and that you're going to do so, and then you give shelter information, resources, community resources that are available to both Sarah and her husband, available to her. You encourage her to get John to go to some counseling, some treatment program, and you relate to Sarah that she needs counseling also, that there's deep issues here psychologically that likely need to be addressed through counseling. But unlike option B, you're not taking on the role of the parent here. You're simply being the clinician. You're doing according to the dictates of the law in terms of reporting Edna's injuries, and then you give resources available to them. Option D, you don't report Edna because of the danger in which this will place her. This will also protect Sarah, encourage Sarah to get counseling. Now, I think this one is also reasonable. However, you recognize that in option D, that you are really stepping outside of the law. If the law dictates that Sarah that Edna has to be reported, then that's a problem, and you recognize that. However, it is an option for you available. Just because the law says to do things does not make the law ethical and or moral. So you recognize in option D that you're stepping outside of the law in terms of making that decision, but you do it in order to prevent further injury, perhaps, or worse. If you're that concerned about the situation, and that reporting Edna may well lead in a short-term way to severe injuries and or potentially a death, then that would be a reasonable option, perhaps. And then option E, you convince Sarah. So, and then you threaten them. Basically, you say if John doesn't come in, then I'll turn Edna in, and things are going to be really bad. I don't think, although the law requires, we've recognized the law requires this to be reported, I don't think bargaining with Sarah is really going to lead to the desired result. To threaten her, in other words, to say you bring your husband in, you bring for counseling, you're setting yourself up as potentially being the bargaining agent with Sarah by threatening her, and that's not a good, probably not a good option, not wise to do that. So what do you think? It looks like a lot of you are. If I wish we had the ability to poll all of you. I don't know how to do that. There may be a way to do that, but I don't. I wish there was or whatever. But what I'd like to know is what do you think? So if you just type in to the comments A, B, C, D, or E, what do you think? A, B, C, or D that you think is the option that you would do. Now, remember, in an MMI setting or in a traditional interview setting, you got to make a decision. You got to say, this is what I would do, and this is why. The various options available to me are X, Y, and Z, A, B, C, D, E, and I would go for this one. So Billy says C. Billy says C. We have Trish says C. Jennifer says C or D. Now, Jennifer, you got to make a decision here. You can't sit on the fence. You got to. What I'm asking is, what would you do? You make a decision. John says C. Vaishnavi says C. Paige says C. It looks like everybody is pretty much saying C. You're going to be required, and you're going to refer with resources, community resources to Sarah. And you know, I think and I think you're right. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer necessarily. Some are more reasonable than others, of course. And again, the MMI station is not necessarily looking for the right answer here. What they're looking for is your thought process. Are you processing this? Are you examining what are the options available to you? Are you able to communicate your thoughts in a reasonable way, etc.? So Trish says, just to clarify, by law, are we required to report domestic abuse and elderly abuse, or just elderly abuse? And that's a very good question. That's a super good question. And what I would say to you is that, in general, the law does not require you to report domestic abuse. It depends a little bit on the state that you're in. I'm most familiar with Texas, the situation here in Texas. But in Texas, you do not have to report domestic abuse unless there are minors involved, or there are the elderly over 65 in this state, or incompetent. Now, if Sarah was judged to be incompetent, if she had some mental issues that really made you question her competence, then that potentially would be that. But if we accept the notion that Sarah is simply an adult who is competent, then we would not, by law, have to report that to the authorities. So, and a good question was just asked in an MMI session. How long do you have to answer a question like this? This case is probably a little more complicated than one that you would see in an MMI setting, but it's similar. It could be. Typically, you'd have about 2 minutes to review the case, think about what you're going to do. You could make some notes, etc. And then you would have approximately 8 minutes to relay your answer to the interviewer. So about 2 minutes to review the case or the dilemma, and then about 8 minutes to deliver the message. So as you can see, this case, the purpose for giving you this particular case was to show you the process that we're going through. That doing the framework, see identify the dilemma. What are the knowns and the unknowns? For example, we don't know the age of the children, and then to identify what I would do, what's the optimal one that I would choose, and then to relay that to the interviewer. So that's the process, that we're going through here. A good question that Micah asks: could you lose your license in any way by doing what is legally the right thing? What protections do you have if you choose what's medically right versus legally? Well, that's why, it's a good question. And if you choose not to report her, you would be open to, potentially legal issues and that are involved there. So that's a good question, and one that would have to, in actuality, in this situation, be examined by you. But again, you're there in the room. You don't have time to consult your attorney. You're dealing with Sarah right there, right then, and you have to make a decision. What are you going to do here for Sarah? So let's just go back and review. Here's the issues involved in this case. There are issues of confidentiality, and I think all of these are good words to remember, good words for you to know the meaning of and how they're used in medical situations, in medical ethics. And every day we come up with these. We don't often use these specific terms such as non-maleficence. We simply say, I don't want to make it any worse than it already is, for example. But these issues are clearly ones that are involved in this particular case: confidentiality, autonomy. What is the greatest benefit here? I don't want to do any harm. Non-maleficence, paternalism. And this is where I think what you have to consider is you want to be able to know these terms and potentially use them in the appropriate way in your explanation of what you would do. If you want to impress your interviewer, which is ultimately one of the goals of an interview from your perspective in terms of your agenda as the applicant, then you would be able to know these terms, and it would be helpful. Paternalism, competence, and definitely legal obligations and the physician's responsibility. These are all issues in the case. So things to remember here in terms of an MMI and the multiple mini interviews. There's no necessarily right answer, and this case is a good one. Most of you came up with C as what you would do, but I think it could be argued that D would possibly be good, recognizing that it is stepping outside of the bounds, at least in this state and probably most states, of legality, but to not report Edna. But there's no necessarily right answer. The point of the MMI is not to identify the right answer. It is how you're thinking about this, how your thought process, and how well you communicate that to the interviewer. Be sure to delineate what are the options available to you and to select one and then defend it. And we identified last week that we were going to that potentially some stations in an MMI situation may give you an issue and ask you to argue both sides of it, both sides of a particular issue. Well, this is I would do X because of 1, 2, 3, but you could also do Y because of 1, 2, 3. So you're looking at it from both angles, and you're arguing both sides of it to show that you see the sides of a particular issue potentially. So I hope this has been instructive for you tonight. I think this was a good case. Domestic abuse cases are clearly very difficult. I think you as the physician have to recognize that you are not trained to be a mental health provider. You are also not trained to be a lawyer or a member of the child protective services or adult protective services of your state or community. That your chief issue is your chief goal is to address medical issues, but you recognize that there are other issues involved here, social, cultural, others that may well be involved in the addressing of the dilemma. So I hope that's been helpful for you. What I want to tell you about next week. Next week's going to be great. We're going to have a film clip from a movie from 1962, a black and white movie. And I know I'm going way back here, but it's a great film clip that we'll watch from a movie called The Interns. And it's about intern doctors, and there's a specific ethical dilemma presented in this clip, and I want us to talk about it. I want you to, we'll watch it together on here on the broadcast, and then we'll talk about what are the things involved, and what might you do in the particular situation. So I hope that you come back next week, next Thursday night on the 25th of March, and we'll watch this film clip and examine the issues involved together. And I think it'll be a great time for us to be together. I want to thank you all for attending tonight. It's been a great time with you. I always enjoy this. I hope it's beneficial to you. Be sure and let me know what you think. My email address I will give to you. Let me put it up on the thing for you. So there's my email address, scott@map.com, scott@map.com. And if you have a comment or a question or whatever, feel free to email me and let me know. Let me know your thoughts. Has this been beneficial to you so far? Has it been interesting? Are you enjoying it? Whatever. Happy thoughts are always great to hear. But if you do have feedback, I'd love to hear, positive or negative. I'd love to hear feedback, and so let me know what you think. As always, I want to encourage you, those of you who use Mapped, I'd like to encourage you to check out the Mapped product, the technology platform for pre-med students on mapped.com. You can see a free trial for 14 days, and you don't have to show us a credit card. Mapped as a technology platform is really great. It has a lot of wonderful benefits to students. And we also do one-on-one coaching for pre-meds. So we have one-on-one advising, either general pre-med advising. We can do essay feedback for you for not only your personal statement, but also for the extracurricular activity descriptions and secondary essays, etc. We do interview preparation sessions with students, as well as entire application cycle advising. So check that out, map.com/services, obviously map.com for checking out the product, and tell your friends and about it if you're enjoying using it, if you're on it. If you haven't tried it yet, certainly encourage you to do so. But until next week, I wish you a fond farewell, adieu to you, and have a nice evening. And we will. I'll see you next week, everybody. Thanks for being here. Bye bye.